Chapter 1310. The car went all the way along the main road in the underground traffic network, without turning or taking a detour. When it reached the end, there was a slight slope on the road. Going up the slope, an extremely wide square appeared in front of the think tanks. The inner city of Xianyuan City was lush like a big garden, but the underground road planning was extremely neat, avoiding fancy and winding to the greatest extent, so the possibility of getting lost was very small. The square at the end of the main road could be said to be the only place on the surface of the inner city of Xianyuan City where cars could be found. The moment the car was about to enter the square, the water column sprayed out from the tires on both sides. The water spread quickly on the car body with the impact, washing away the mud on the car body. Li Huazhang, who was by the window, didn't notice for a moment, and a large amount of water sprayed directly through the half-open window. Li Huazhang was shocked, and several people in the back row also wiped the water on their faces awkwardly and scolded the driver angrily in unison. "Why didn't you remind us?" The driver held the steering wheel and rolled his eyes. "I haven't been to this square, how would I know? It's probably an automatic car washing device." Li Huazhang looked out of the window with the corner of his mouth twitching. Outside the window, the flat and wide square was clean and tidy, surrounded by a lush forest, and there was only one entrance to the square. Looking along the entrance, it was a straight passage. The heavy and almost towering gate of Emperor Dong's palace was at the end of the passage. The atmosphere in the car gradually became quiet. The two SUVs slowed down at the same time. The sound of the car horn behind the car rang. The SUVs subconsciously gave way. A black Volkswagen belonging to the inner city of Xianyuan City slowly drove over. Bathed in the water column, the car turned around after entering the square, and left leisurely. Li Huazhang took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, "Let's go." The driver said yes, and his voice was a little dry. At this moment, the mood of everyone in the two cars was extremely complicated. From the purgatory of heaven capital to Emperor Dong's palace, it seemed to be a distance of hundreds of miles, but after the change of position, they would face a completely different life. They didn't know what Li Tianlan would do to them next. They were the top think tank of the purgatory of heaven capital, and Li Huazhang was their team leader. Their voices had never been unified, and their stances had never been the same. Li Huazhang was completely loyal to Li Honghe. Although the old man had died, he was still a bright light and faith in his heart. He fully believed in Li Honghe's judgment and vision without any doubt. After Li Honghe handed the Li family over to Li Tianlan, Li Huazhang's mind was naturally not in the purgatory of heaven capital. He was a real member of the Li family, and did not have the idea of being independent. In the past 2 years, people from the purgatory of heaven capital had been joining Emperor Dong's palace. Their mentality was almost the same. They could not change Li Guangtu, but at least they could represent themselves and let themselves enter Li Tianlan's camp. Li Huazhang was different. He had always felt that he was in Li Tianlan's camp. Not only himself, but also everything in the purgatory of heaven capital should belong to Li Tianlan. So the reason why he hadn't joined Emperor Dong's palace for more than 2 years since Li Honghe's death was to persuade Li Guangtu and other people in the purgatory of heaven capital. Several in-depth talks with Li Guangtu were fruitless. The more they talked, the more annoyed Li Guangtu and gradually excluded him, the senior staff officer, from the core high level. Li Huazhang never gave up. He still seized every opportunity to make people in the purgatory of heaven capital approve of Li Tianlan. Among the think tanks, Qianji and White Fox were persuaded by him. They were still hesitating, but after the news of Li Guangtu and Gu Xingyun's cooperation came, they finally made up their minds and followed him to Emperor Dong's palace. Among the other think tanks, One-Eyed and Qilin left the Li family's camp the latest, and were the most familiar with Li Tianlan. From beginning to end, they were on Li Tianlan's side. The others had always maintained a wait-and-see state. They were inclined to the purgatory of heaven capital and Emperor Dong's palace. They mainly hoped that the Li family would become stronger, and did not care about the outcome between the purgatory of heaven capital and Emperor Dong's palace. In the purgatory of heaven capital, they were a team and made plans for the future of the Li family. But after coming to Emperor Dong's palace, they were likely to get different treatment because of their different mentalities. Li Huazhang did not have to worry. As the core of the Li family, he would be a core member whether in the purgatory of Heaven Capital or in Emperor Dong's palace. One-Eyed and Qilin also did not have to worry. Their positions were clear. If they joined Emperor Dong's palace, they would definitely be regarded as Li Tianlan's confidants. What about the others? They were think tanks, not good at fighting. Now there were so many talents in Emperor Dong's palace. If they were to be casually thrown into some corner, their so-called talents would be buried. Back to the purgatory of Heaven Capital? Not to mention that Li Guangtu was dying. Their return to the purgatory of Heaven Capital from Emperor Dong's palace could be regarded as a betrayal. If they went to other forces would also have scruples about them. If there was no place for them in Emperor Dong's palace, their future life would undoubtedly be extremely difficult. The off-road vehicle slowly stopped in front of the gate of Emperor Dong's palace. In front of the gate, there were already 2 rows of elites of Emperor Dong's palace with loaded guns. Dozens of people stood on both sides, forming a pedestrian passage. At the front of the passage, Xiao Mahai stood quietly and watched the 2 off-road vehicles approach. Looking at the badge of the Purgatory of Heaven Capital printed on the body of the off-road vehicles, he narrowed his eyes and smiled. Li Huazhang got off first. In the 2 cars, the top think tanks of the Purgatory of Heaven Capital got off one after another. They looked up at the gate of Emperor Dong's palace in front of them, more or less with some complicated feelings in their eyes. Xiao Mahai looked quietly motionless, and there was no emotion in his smile. Li Huazhang took a deep breath and took the initiative to step forward. He reached out his hand and said, "Hello, Director Xiao." The chief director of Emperor Dong's palace. No matter what his position was in the dark world, at least in Emperor Dong's palace, he was the core of the core. It could be said that he was the most trusted person. Just like Li Huazhang was the chief steward of the Li family. As long as he was trusted enough, the scope of this director's power was not only limited to the internal affairs of Emperor Dong's palace, but also to the external affairs of Emperor Dong's palace. "Hello, Advisor Li." Xiao Mahai smiled and reached out to shake hands with Li Huazhang. He was neither arrogant nor enthusiastic, and his sense of distance was obvious. "As soon as you entered the inner city, I got the news that you are all distinguished guests from the Purgatory of Heaven Capital. If you come to Emperor Dong's palace, you should inform me in advance so that I can prepare to welcome you." Distinguished guests? Li Huazhang was speechless and laughed at himself. What kind of distinguished guests are we? Director Xiao, you are too polite. Then why are you here? Xiao Mahai narrowed his eyes and remained calm. Li Huazhang took a deep look at him and whispered, "We just want to go home." Chapter 13:11. Go home. Xiao Mahai savored the word carefully. His eyes brightened slightly, and his formal smile seemed to be much more natural. Xiao Mahai knew that His Majesty went to the Purgatory of Heaven Capital. He also knew that Li Tianlan gave the Purgatory of Heaven Capital 3 days. It had been more than 20 years since the Li family collapsed. With the rise of Li Tianlan, it was divided into the Purgatory of Heaven Capital and Emperor Dong's palace. Now Emperor Dong was invincible in the world, and he was the patriarch appointed by Senior Li before his death. With strength and righteousness, Li Tianlan had no patience to slowly integrate the 2 sides. He defeated Li Guangtu, Jiang Shangyu, and Gu Xingyun, showed his strength, went to the Purgatory of Heaven Capital, explained that he was the future heir of the Li family, and settled the concerns of many people in the Purgatory of Heaven Capital. He had done what he should do. 3 days were enough for the elites of the Purgatory of Heaven Capital, who were really willing to stand beside Emperor Dong's palace to make a decision. As for what would happen after 3 days, everyone knew very well. Li Tianlan was the patriarch of the Li family. He had done his best to the Purgatory of Heaven Capital. Within 3 days, those who came to Emperor Dong's palace from the Purgatory of Heaven Capital were on his side, and those who didn't were enemies. Without the shackles of the past, Emperor Dong's edge was invincible in today's dark world. Xiao Mahai was fully prepared for this. He had enough reasons to believe that more and more elites, and even high-level officials of the Purgatory of Heaven Capital would join Emperor Dong's palace in the next few days. Emperor Dong's palace couldn't control the whole Tiannan, but it had 100% control over Xianyuan City. As soon as the two cars with the mark of the Purgatory of Heaven capital entered the outer city of Xianyuan City, Xiao Mahai, as the director, had already received the news. He let them come to the gate of Emperor Dong's palace. Although he was vigilant, he was ready to welcome his own people. But the two SUVs still gave him a great surprise. Of course he knew Li Huazhang. He was the general director of the Li family in its heyday. Many years ago, Great Master Wu Wei called him a crouching dragon. Although he was not a crouching dragon in the historical novel, his ability in internal affairs was absolutely top-notch. It was said that if the Li family hadn't collapsed too suddenly, Li Honghe would have planned to let Li Huazhang enter the official career. If everything went well, now Li Huazhang would at least be a big shot at the level of a counselor. Not only Li Huazhang, but everyone who got off the two SUVs, Xiao Mahai knew them all. One Eye, Kailan, and Hupo were all figures that His Majesty had mentioned in person. Even today, His Majesty still mentioned them in the same way. He still called them three uncles. Their future status in Emperor Dong's palace was obvious. Qianji White Fox, Nameless Zi, Qianzhong. Xiao Mahai was also familiar with these four people. Among the four, Wu Mingzi was a Taoist priest many years ago. After joining the Li family, he still did not change his Taoist name. In terms of strength, he might be the only one among the 10 who could be compared with Li Huazhang. He was at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, and also the youngest think tank. Qianji was at the peak of the fire-flaming realm, while Qianzhong and White Fox were just ordinary people. From their standpoint, the four of them were partial to Li Guangtu, at least before Li Guangtu was captured. In the past few years of the Purgatory of Heaven capital's development, especially after they came to Tiannan and secretly played games with Emperor Dong's palace, the four of them could be said to be the most active figures. Spirit Monkey, Stoneheart, Baiwe. The three of them were relatively neutral in the Purgatory of Heaven capital. They could be seen in a series of decisions made by the Purgatory of Heaven capital to the outside world, but they had never participated in any plan against Emperor Dong's palace. In the matter of the Li family's internal strife, they were the most lenient. It didn't matter who won or lost. What they cared about was the Li family. 10 people. 10 of the best think tanks in the world. They were not famous in the dark world. After all, the highest strength was only at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm. But no one dared to ignore their role behind the scenes. Each of them was qualified to appear in the confidential intelligence of Emperor Dong's palace. After serving as the general director of Emperor Dong's palace, Xiao Mahai also studied the information of these people. In fact, if they did not come to Emperor Dong's palace in a few days and made their stand clear, then when Emperor Dong's palace attacked the Purgatory of Heaven capital, the first target would be these people. When Emperor Dong's palace and the Purgatory of Heaven capital were bound by the rules of Zhongzhou state, the threat of these think tanks was even far greater than that of Daybreak of the Invincible Realm and Dawn of the Top Half-Step Invincible Realm. Xiao Mahai just didn't expect that in such a short period of time, all 10 of them would be here. This was the foundation of the Li family. They appeared here at the same time. Xiao Mahai could completely imagine how shaken the people of the Purgatory of Heaven capital were. For Emperor Dong's palace, this was definitely a good thing. Xiao Mahai's eyes narrowed slightly, because of the strong smile. He looked at the 10 think tanks in front of him and said with a smile, "His Majesty has been waiting for this day for a long time. Come with me, everyone. I have informed Secretary Han. She is in the reception room. She is waiting for you." Secretary Han, Li Huazhang was stunned. He knew who Xiao Mahai was talking about. Li Tianlan's current personal secretary, Han Xinyan, was also the young lady of the Flourishing Age Fund and the daughter of the military counselor. Li Tianlan undoubtedly trained her as the next CEO of Emperor Dong's palace. At present, Han Xinyan's performance was not amazing since she served as his personal secretary, but she did not make any mistakes. Although she was young, she was very stable and seemed to be in line with the rules. But when combined with her position, wasn't this another kind of excellence? Li Huazhang hesitated and whispered, "Tianlan, well, where is His Majesty?" Xiao Mahai was leading the way in front. Hearing this, he raised his hand to look at his watch and said with a smile, "His Majesty should not have gotten up yet." Li Huazhang and the others might not understand. But as the director, Xiao Mahai was very clear that as long as Qin Weibai was there, no matter how early His Majesty and Qin Weibai went to bed, they would get up very late. This was already obvious when Li Tianlan was in the desert prison. Li Huazhang paused slightly and exchanged a look with Qianji, who was walking beside him. Qianji's expression was very calm, but there was a touch of nervousness in his eyes. Li Tianlan had not gotten up yet. The next person they were going to see was Dong Huang's personal secretary, Han Xinyan. Now that Dong Huang was too lazy to manage things, those who held power and were close to him were the most difficult to deal with. For example, Xiao Mahai in front of them. And for example, Han Xinyan. To some extent, Han Xinyan, the personal secretary who was cultivated as the next CEO of Emperor Dong's palace, could completely represent Li Tianlan's will at some point. When they came to Emperor Dong's palace from the purgatory of heaven capital, the first person they met was Xiao Mahai. But from a business point of view, the first person they met was Han Xinyan. Both Xiao Mahai and Han Xinyan had nothing to do with the Li family. They were the top officials of Emperor Dong's palace, not the Li family. Whether Li Tianlan really did not get up or not, it was a fact that he did not show up. Was he going to contact them in the most normal way? Or was he going to put aside the feelings of the Li family for the time being, and observe their abilities from the most objective point of view? There was no doubt that this was an interview. Chapter 13:12. When he was with Qin Weibai, Li Tianlan often woke up very early but got up very late. He didn't want to. He was too lazy to move. He was thinking of a hero's grave in the land of tenderness, but he didn't want to lift the quilt. He liked to lie quietly on the soft bed with one arm as his pillow. He squinted slightly, opened the window, and enjoyed the comfortable morning breeze of Emperor Dong's palace, quietly enjoying an undisturbed morning. The snow-white thin quilt puffed up high. Qin Weibai's body hidden in the quilt moved and subconsciously made a whimpering sound. Li Tianlan reached his arm in and touched Qin Weibai's head. He smiled and said, "Tired?" The beauty did not answer. Instead, she reached out and held Li Tianlan's palm. Their fingers clasped tightly. Woo! In the slight sound, Li Tianlan's body suddenly tightened. He closed his eyes and his mind went blank. His soul seemed to leave his body with all his thoughts. It kept rising, flying unscrupulously to the blue sky and white clouds, and then slowly falling back. His body gradually relaxed, and the corners of his mouth rose. Cough, cough. Qin Weibai coughed a little quickly. Li Tianlan subconsciously wanted to lift the quilt, but his palm was grabbed by Qin Weibai. No cough, don't look. Her body moved, and she climbed out of the quilt, looking down at Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan chuckled and played with her messy hair. Qin Weibai's face was red, and her eyes were misty. Her voice was also a little hoarse, and she was indescribably seductive. Are you satisfied? What do you think? Li Tianlan reached out and wiped the corners of Qin Weibai's mouth. Then he casually wiped the thing in his hand on her hair. Qin Weibai glared at him. She was weak and charming, and said softly, "Pervert." It's human nature. Li Tianlan's expression did not change. Do men like to let women wash them clean, and then dirty them with their own hands? Qin Weibai tilted her head and asked. Li Tianlan coughed dryly. That's because I can't help it. I don't believe you. Qin Weibai chuckled and pulled Li Tianlan's face. You are more and more disrespectful to me. You don't care about me, and you only know how to bully me all day. Don't you want me to bear your children? Ha! How did you do it? You know how to sweet talk. I won't believe you anymore. Li Tianlan held her in his arms and said with a smile, I'm a man of my word. How dare you question my sincerity? It seems that I haven't punished you enough. And no. Qin Weibai shook her head violently. I want to take a shower. It's so dirty. I want to sleep. I'm so tired. Li Tianlan gently tapped her nose. You haven't eaten yet. Qin Weibai glared at him with some grievance and said in a hoarse voice, I'm full. No, I'm not hungry. The corners of Li Tianlan's mouth lifted. Before he could laugh, Qin Weibai had already pinched his waist hard. She took the opportunity to struggle out of bed, put on a loose robe, and walk to the bathroom with light steps. Are you really not going to eat? Li Tianlan sat up in bed. Qin Weibai, who walked a little strangely, opened the bathroom door and snorted. "We still need to have lunch. Hurry up and leave. I want to take a nap." "You make it sound like you're the only one who loves cleanliness. I want to wash too." Li Tianlan lifted the quilt and got out of bed, approaching Qin Weibai with a smile. Qin Weibai screamed and rushed into the bathroom in a flurry, intending to close the door. Before the door could close, Li Tianlan held it down. His figure squeezed into the bathroom. The high and mighty goddess was begging for something pitifully, and then there was a short, sharp scream. In the scream, the bathroom door was closed. It was already 10:15 in the morning when Han Xinyan's call came in. Qin Weibai curled up in the quilt in a daze. Her beautiful eyes blinked and tried to stare at Li Tianlan. It was sunny outside the window. A breeze blew in, and the bedroom was surrounded by a delicate fragrance with a touch of sunshine. Li Tianlan diligently cleaned up the battlefield. The messy things were put together and broken into countless pieces under the sword energy. He held the phone and learned that the think tank of the Purgatory of Heaven capital had requested to join Emperor Dong's palace. "I got it." Li Tianlan was silent for a while before he said softly. Without giving a definite reply, he hung up the phone, sat down next to Qin Weibai again, and touched her hair. Qin Weibai was still looking at him with resentment. She seemed to be too sleepy to open her eyes, but she didn't sleep. "Are you still not convinced?" Li Tianlan flicked Qin Weibai's forehead. Qin Weibai snorted, but she didn't dare to provoke him again. Her body curled up subconsciously. "Go to sleep. I'll wake you up when it's time to eat." Li Tianlan's voice became gentle. Qin Weibai nodded, tried to open her eyes, and whispered, "What happened?" "Good news," Li Tianlan said with a smile. "My uncle came to Emperor Dong's palace with the think tank of the Purgatory of Heaven capital." A flash of light flashed through Qin Weibai's eyes. She tried to keep her eyes open, but now her energy was really not enough to support her to plan anything. Her mind was chaotic, and she was too lazy to think about anything. "Purgatory of Heaven capital," Qin Weibai whispered. "There's no Purgatory of Heaven capital." Li Tianlan's eyes flickered slightly. "My uncle brought the news that Li Kuangtu officially disbanded the Purgatory of Fanatics and recognized my identity as the patriarch of the Li family. He officially withdrew from the Li family from today. All the industries, armaments, intelligence, resources, and connections of the Purgatory of Heaven capital were unconditionally handed over to Emperor Dong's palace." Li Kuangtu only took Dawn, Daybreak, Phoenix, and some elites of the Sanluo Temple of the Everlasting, which added up to less than 600 people. In addition, most of the veterans of the Li family are currently on their way to Emperor Dong's palace. A small number of people are guarding the supplies, and they are waiting for me to send someone over to take over the industries of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. These are the news brought by my uncle, but he came earlier and didn't see Li Kuang to make the decision. The news came from the Purgatory of Heaven capital, but I don't think it's fake. There was no point in falsifying such news. Moreover, Li Huaqing was currently in the headquarters of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. If it was fake, Li Huaqing couldn't have kept it a secret. Moreover, Li Kuangtu couldn't get anything from the cost of the news. At most, some of the elites sent by Li Tianlan would be buried in the Purgatory of Heaven capital. Then Li Tianlan's real body would rush over, and none of them would survive. To say the least, even if Li Kuangtu wanted to set up a trap for Li Tianlan now, he didn't have that ability. At least the veterans of the Purgatory of Heaven capital, because of his cooperation with Gu Xingyun, were unlikely to completely obey Li Kuangtu's orders. In the near future, some elites of the Purgatory of Heaven capital would join Emperor Dong's palace, which was something that Li Tianlan had expected. He just didn't expect the Purgatory of Heaven capital, or Li Kuangtu, to do it so thoroughly. The arrival of the think tank was already a surprise. Li Kuangtu's decision was equivalent to giving a big cake to Emperor Dong's palace for free. Therefore, Han Xinyan's interview with the think tanks naturally couldn't go on. Now she was also waiting for Li Tianlan to go in person to give the Purgatory of Heaven capital, and these think tanks an explanation. Qin Weibai. With a chuckle, she rubbed her face against Li Tianlan's palm and said softly, "Li Kuangtu admitted defeat. But he didn't beg for mercy." Li Tianlan's tone was calm. That was what Li Guangtu thought of, a relatively good way. He did have feelings for the Li family. He also admitted that the current Emperor Dong's palace far surpassed the purgatory of heaven capital. And he also admitted that he had no chance of winning against Li Tianlan. He admitted defeat. But he was still unconvinced. His choice was not to use everything in his hands to fight Li Tianlan to the end. He disbanded the purgatory of heaven capital and handed all its assets to Emperor Dong's palace, so that the Li family could be preserved to the greatest extent. And he officially withdrew from the Li family, which meant that Li Guangtu had nothing to do with the Li family in the future. There was no old relationship between him, Li Tianlan, or Emperor Dong's palace. He handed the Li family to Li Tianlan, which meant that he admitted defeat. But he didn't join Emperor Dong's palace, which meant that he was unconvinced. He still had the idea of competing with Li Tianlan for the leadership of the Li family. But he didn't rely on the purgatory of heaven capital. So Li Guangtu had no way out. From the moment he decided to disband the purgatory of heaven capital, he had given up the foundation that had supported him for more than 20 years. Next, he would turn to the parliament of Zhongzhou state, completely unite with Jiang Shangyu and Gu Xingyun, get rid of him at all costs, and control a complete Li family again. Li Tianlan was very clear about this. Isn't this just right? Qin Weibai said softly. What we need is for him to admit defeat. If he begs for mercy, it will be boring. Her eyes were a little tired but full of smiles. Since he has broken up with the Li family, we don't need to care about his feelings. Under such circumstances, everyone in the Li family will understand. Since he is still unconvinced and wants to turn to the parliament and cooperate with Gu Xingyun, then no matter what happens to him in the future, he asked for it. It has nothing to do with us. Yes, Li Tianlan whispered, he asked for it. I'm going to sleep first. When I wake up, I have the energy to think about the next situation. Qin Weibai whispered. The resources left by the Li family are still very rich, especially some hidden resources. They don't have the strength to make use of these hidden resources quickly, but the Flourishing Age Fund does. I have to think about it. Go to sleep first. Li Tianlan whispered. I'll go see them first. His fingers gently pinched Qin Weibai's ear. After talking with the academics, the teacher and I can breathe a sigh of relief. The situation we face will stabilize, and military counselor can come back. How to integrate the Flourishing Age Fund with the industry of the purgatory of heaven capital. Military counselor is the professional in this regard. His voice was getting lower and lower. Qin Weibai tried hard to open her beautiful eyes that silently accused him of last night's brutality. She closed them and fell asleep very sweetly. Li Tianlan leaned over and kissed her face gently. Then he got up and left the bedroom. At this moment, the Li family's think tank was still waiting for him in the living room. Farther away, most of the Li family's veterans belonging to the Purgatory of Heaven capital were moving toward Xianyuan City. The Purgatory of Heaven capital had been disbanded. The core of the Purgatory Legion should have set off at this time, withdrawing from Tiannan in batches. And the power belonging to the Li family was officially gathering in Emperor Dong's palace. Li Tianlan walked quietly in the corridor of Emperor Dong's palace castle. Scenes of the past flashed in his mind, from childhood to adulthood, and they were extremely clear. The Li family had collapsed. Today, more than 20 years later, a brand new, Holy family would usher in a new starting point. Chapter 13:13. The atmosphere in the reception hall was quiet and solemn. Han Xinyan, Emperor Donghuang's personal secretary, sat on the sofa with her legs together. She unconsciously pinched a dried fruit and put it into her rosy mouth. Her eyes flickered slightly, and it was obvious that she was thinking about something sensitive. She was Li Tianlan's personal secretary. But in fact, everyone knew that Han Xinyan was very likely to replace her father, Han Donglu, as the next CEO of Emperor Dong's palace. So Han Xinyan's actual scope of power was ridiculously large. Most of the secrets of Emperor Dong's palace were not secrets in front of her. Han Xinyan would know all the plans made by Emperor Dong's palace in various fields before Li Tianlan saw them. If there was something to do, the secretary would do it. If there was nothing to do, the secretary would do it. Li Tianlan didn't do the second half of the sentence, but she did the best in the first half. So whether in terms of position or actual work, Han Xinyan's appearance was enough for the think tank of the Purgatory of Heaven capital to join Emperor Dong's palace. Li Tianlan met them because of their old friendship. He just wanted to show his face and go through the motions. That was all. Those who were really friends with Li Tianlan, such as the Kylin, Amber and the One-Eyed, would not talk about the old days with him on such an occasion. The 10 think tanks all had real talents, but they had different standpoints. But now that they had joined Emperor Dong's palace, at least on the surface, Li Tianlan couldn't really be close to them. He would even deliberately ignore the 3 uncles of Kylin, Amber, and One-Eyed. No one could control what they did in private in the future. But on the first day that the think tank joined Emperor Dong's palace, Li Tianlan would never let them feel that he was an outsider. Therefore, a simple appearance, or at most a meal, was a kind of gesture. How they integrated into Emperor Dong's palace, what role they should play, what work they should do, and what duties they would be assigned. These were Han Xinyan's and their own affairs. So Han Xinyan met them here, and arranged a so-called interview. When everything was settled, it was almost lunchtime. At this time, Li Tianlan came to show up. After lunch, they would officially join Emperor Dong's palace. But this process was completely interrupted by the news brought by Li Huazhang. Neither side intended to give each other a show of strength. It was just that this news was too unbelievable. The first thing Li Guangtu, who had been fighting with Emperor Dong's palace not long ago, did after getting out of captivity was to quit the Li family, disband the Purgatory of Heaven capital, and give all the properties of the Purgatory of Heaven capital to Emperor Dong's palace. This feeling was indescribable astonishment and absurdity. What was the Purgatory of Heaven capital? This was a behemoth that had the foundation of a superpower. However, it did not have its own foundation. Strictly speaking, it couldn't be considered a superpower. However, it wasn't any weaker than a superpower. It just lacked a foundation. The Purgatory of Heaven capital was not just the headquarters in Tiandu City, which was pitiful compared to Emperor Dong's palace. How big was the Purgatory of Heaven capital? This was something that even Li Huazhang couldn't say. But what he said was enough to attract Han Xinyan's attention. There were nearly 40 secret bases around the world, including Star State, Germany, France, England, Italy, the Kingdom of Desak, Annan East Island, Snow Country, Austria, and other countries. There were tens of thousands of talents in various fields. There were 7 high-tech laboratories, including weapons development and gene medicine development. There were companies with total assets of nearly 200 billion yuan. There were intelligence networks in major countries all over the world, all of it. Li Guangtu handed it all over without holding anything back. There was no doubt that this was a big gift, one that Emperor Dong's palace couldn't refuse. Han Xinyan was qualified to arrange most of the think tanks who came to Emperor Dong's palace, and even the other elites of the Purgatory of Heaven capital, who would join Emperor Dong's palace in the future. But when the whole Purgatory of Heaven capital was in front of her, she had to inform Li Tianlan, and let him handle it in person. Time passed quietly. Han Xinyan kept eating melon seeds, and the light in her eyes became brighter and brighter. The heavy door of the reception hall opened silently. Han Xinyan, who had been thinking about how to accept this big gift, immediately stood up. Li Tianlan came in from outside the door. Han Xinyan walked over to him. The think tanks also stood up at the same time. Li Huazhang hesitated and stood where he was without moving. The others didn't move either. Beside Qilin, Wu Mingzi, who used to be a Taoist priest but was no longer a Taoist priest, was still wearing a clean Taoist robe. He squinted slightly and looked at Han Xinyan's graceful back. His eyes fell on the perky buttocks under the close-fitting secretary suit, and the corners of his mouth rose slightly. If you dare to look at it again, believe it or not, someone will dig your eyes out right away. Qilin said calmly. This is Emperor Dong's palace. If you don't change your bad habit, you won't even know how you die. She's not His Majesty's woman. Wu Mingzi chuckled. As His Majesty's personal secretary, she didn't climb into His Majesty's bed. She hasn't succeeded for so long, and the chances of success in the future are not high. She's not looking at the mistress. Is this wrong? His Majesty doesn't care about you. Do you think military counselor doesn't care about you? Qilin sneered. Wu Mingzi was a think tank, and he was the youngest among the 10 of them. He was also an expert at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm. No force would complain about having too many of such people, but no force was destined to have too many of them. This also fostered his somewhat presumptuous character. Before Li Guangtu and Gu Xingyan cooperated, he was partial to Li Guangtu, and the two were still on good terms. What made Wu Mingzi most proud was that he had touched Phoenix's buttocks, but he was still alive. Although Phoenix was not the mistress of the purgatory of Heaven Capital at that time, Wu Mingzi had lived to the present, which had already proved his value and ability. Military counselor, humph. Wu Mingzi wanted to say something, but in the end he said nothing. He knew his own value, but he would not overestimate it. Obviously, compared to the military counselor, he was not worth much. Obviously, compared with military counselor, he would not think that he was more important than military counselor even if he was crazy. In his sight, Han Xingyan walked up to Li Tianlan and whispered something to him. Li Tianlan nodded. The two walked up to them one after another. Your Majesty. Led by Li Huazhang, the 10 think tanks bowed slightly at the same time. A smile appeared on Li Tianlan's calm face. It's been a long time, uncles. His eyes fell on the only woman among the think tanks. An Aunt White Fox. The average-looking and a little fat White Fox smiled, and her eyes were a little uneasy. Welcome home, everyone. Li Tianlan said softly. White Fox's eyes were slightly relaxed, and the others also seemed relieved. Thank you, Your Majesty. Li Tianlan stood in front of them and did not move. He glanced at the think tanks in front of him one after another, and narrowed his eyes slightly. I am very familiar with little uncle. He suddenly smiled. And the 3 uncles Qilin, Hupe and One Eye. When they left the camp, I was 17 years old, and they watched me grow up. When Aunt White Fox left, I was 12 years old, and I still remember. I also remember the 3 uncles Spirit Monkey, Baiyue, and Shirexian. Oh, if I remember correctly, my first wooden sword when I was a child was made by Uncle Spirit Monkey. At that time, I thought the wooden sword was very ugly. Standing in the corner, Spirit Monkey smiled. He was the oldest among them. His hair was already gray, and there were even some age spots on his face. Li Tianlan looked at him and nodded. Then he looked at a few strange figures. These are? Li Huazhang took a step forward and said softly. You are not familiar with these people. These two are Qianji and Qianzhong. You should have heard of them. Qianji and Qianzhong. They were a pair of brothers. They followed Li Guangtu to East Island at the very beginning. Li Tianlan had not even seen them before today. Li Tianlan nodded and said calmly, Welcome home. Qianji and Qianzhong bowed at the same time, and said nothing. This is John Doe, and he is John Doe. Li Tianlan suddenly interrupted Li Huazhang's introduction. Wearing a Taoist robe and smiling, John Doe's eyelids twitched slightly. Li Huazhang was also slightly stunned. Li Tianlan laughed. Unexpectedly, he took the initiative to reach out his hand. I've heard a lot about you. John Doe was stunned for about 2 seconds. Then he reached out his hand reflexively and shook hands with Li Tianlan. He said with a smile, Your Majesty, you're too kind, too kind. It's not serious. Li Tianlan's tone was very sincere. You may not know this, but I've heard of you a few years ago. You left a deep impression on me. At that time, well, it should be before the chaos in Snow Country broke out. No, even before the final maneuver of the 2 academies. John Doe seemed to suddenly think of something. His eyes suddenly changed, and his face also became a little pale. Without warning, he suddenly thought of the time point that Li Tianlan mentioned. To be exact, it was a period of time before that time point. At that time, no one knew that Li Tianlan had rebuilt his foundation in the polar region. No one even knew where Li Tianlan was. He suddenly thought of what he had done at that time. It's a waste of talent like you to come to Emperor Dong's palace. Li Tianlan patted John Doe with the other hand. John Doe forced a smile. Your Majesty, you're welcome. I mean it, Li Tianlan said softly. I don't dare to delay your talent. Emperor Dong's palace is small and can't accommodate you, so I plan to send you to a place that is most suitable for you to display your talent. You're welcome. He patted John Doe's palm with his hand. Bang! Amidst a very subtle but extremely shocking sound, Wu Mingzi's entire arm completely exploded without any warning. Blood and muscles burst out like fireworks under the stimulation of the sword energy, bursting through the skin. John Doe's eyes instantly became extremely frightened. Li Tianlan still held his hand and gave it a casual tug. Crack! The extremely dense sound completely broke out in John Doe's body. His body standing in front of Li Tianlan seemed to lose all support in an instant. His whole body directly collapsed to the ground like a mass of rotten meat. Li Tianlan looked calm. This time it seemed to be a very simple pull. But the huge force had completely shattered all the bones and muscles in John Doe's body in an instant. Li Huazhang opened his mouth. Before he could react. No, when everyone, including Nameless Z himself, had yet to react, John Doe died. Chapter 13-14. There was a dead silence in the reception room. Everyone's figure was completely frozen where they were. It happened so suddenly that the so-called witnesses didn't even have the emotion of fear. They stood there quietly, showing only numbness. What's wrong? What happened? Wu Mingzi's body folded up layer by layer and slumped to the ground, looking like a piece of clothing that had been casually folded together. Today, experts at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm were really no different from nonentities in Li Tianlan's eyes. With a casual pat and pull, everything in Wu Mingzi's body had been completely shattered. The huge force with the sword energy completely exploded in Wu Mingzi's body like countless bombs, breaking blood vessels, muscles, bones, and internal organs. Blood directly broke through the skin under the huge pressure, and gushed out of every corner of the body like a fountain. Wu Mingzi's body was already dead. But it all happened too fast. So his consciousness still stayed for a short time. He felt that his eyes slid down quickly, from looking at Li Tianlan's face, and finally he could only see Li Tianlan's shoes. He saw everything in his body squeezed out of his skin, and the red color kept gushing out, but none of it fell on Li Tianlan. The sword energy rotated gently in the void and turned into a cage, completely sealing his body and blood. Wu Mingzi's consciousness became more and more stiff. His eyes moved with difficulty. The moment the extremely strong regret and panic emerged, endless darkness surged and swallowed everything. Li Tianlan looked down at Wu Mingzi's vitality and consciousness completely dissipating. His calm eyes were filled with infinite indifference. The think tanks headed by Li Huazhang were as still as sculptures. Han Xinyan, with a folder in her arms and her long hair fluttering, was also stunned. Li Tianlan entered the reception room. She went up to him. The two of them just said one sentence. The think tanks didn't hear what Han Xinyan said. When she walked up to Li Tianlan, she said, "I don't like that Taoist very much." Han Xinyan always felt that the Taoist's eyes were a little wretched and obscene. Compared with other people who had their own thoughts, the Taoist's eyes always swept over her chest, calves and neck, intentionally or unintentionally, again and again. Any woman would be very sensitive to this kind of gaze. Although Han Xinyan didn't say anything, she said it directly in front of Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan said, then that Taoist was dead. Wasn't this reaction a little too intense? Han Xinyan suddenly felt that she had become Qin Weibai. The think tank of the Purgatory of Heaven capital was now standing here. And it was no longer just a simple think tank. They were the first batch of people to seek refuge in Emperor Dong's palace. They were the veterans of the Li family, which meant too many things. It was related to the so-called hearts of the people, the so-called overall situation, and even the future. How could such a person be killed? How could he kill him so easily? Han Xinyan really didn't think she had the power to make Li Tianlan kill someone just because she said she didn't like him. Moreover, the person he killed was someone who had contributed to the Li family to some extent. Qin Weibai was the only one who could do that. But now Li Tianlan really did it. It was clean and neat. Wu Mingzi died without any chance to struggle. Han Xinyan was a little perturbed. She pursed her lips tightly. This was a complicated feeling of, I treat you as my boss, but you want to fuck me. You. Li Huazhang finally reacted. The muscles on his face kept trembling. He raised his hand and pointed at Li Tianlan. His mind was in a mess. His consciousness understood what had happened, but he didn't know what to say at all. No one knew how long it had been. Li Huazhang, whose face was red, suddenly roared. Bastard! Tianlan, do you know that Wu Mingzi? I know what you said, little uncle. Li Tianlan looked down at his palm and frowned. Han Xinyan took a wet towel from the tea table next to her, and wiped Li Tianlan's palm obediently. Li Huazhang's momentum stagnated, and he became more and more angry. They all knew Wu Mingzi's shortcomings. He was flamboyant, and sometimes his means were indeed cruel, and even had no bottom line. But this was only to the enemy. He was fond of women. He had touched phoenixes but before. He had also touched many beautiful women in the Purgatory of Heaven capital, and he had played with many women outside the Purgatory of Heaven capital. Wu Mingzi's behavior was indeed absurd, but he was absolutely sincere to the Li family. So Li Huazhang and the others didn't like him, but they would never deny that he was one of them. He was indeed a little close to Li Guangtu, but what did that mean? Today's Emperor Dong's palace had completely surpassed the Purgatory of Heaven capital, and the Purgatory of Heaven capital had been disbanded. Only Emperor Dong's palace was the orthodox of the Li family. The first batch of their think tanks came here, and there must be people with different ideas. It was a fact that they were realistic, disappointed with Li Guangtu, or even wanted to ride on his coattails. It was a fact that they all wanted to find their place in the current Emperor Dong's palace, and find a place for their survival. But it was not only because Emperor Dong's palace was invincible now, but also because they recognized their identity and thought that they were part of the Li family, and even the Li family's heroes. Now they came to Emperor Dong's palace, saw the financial strength of Xianyuan City, saw their future living environment, and saw the future prospects of the Li family. All of this was beautiful. But under such beautiful circumstances, they stood in front of Li Tianlan, and he killed them just like that. Under such terrible pressure, was the beauty of Xianyuan City really so beautiful? Under such a beautiful appearance, was this place heaven or hell for the Li family? Li Huazhang's body began to tremble obviously. The blood all over his body seemed to be boiling and concentrated in his brain. The surging anger made Li Huazhang's expression become extremely ferocious. Tell me, what did John Doe do to the Li family? Why did you kill him? Li Tianlan glanced at him silently. The indifference in his eyes slowly dissipated, and his eyes swept from Li Huazhang to every think tank. I'm actually not familiar with the Purgatory of Heaven capital, Li Tianlan said calmly. Li Huazhang looked at him and narrowed his eyes. There are many people I know in the Purgatory of Heaven capital, but there are more I don't know. As for the think tanks, I'm most familiar with 3. One Eye, Kylan and Amber. I know they are the think tanks of the Purgatory of Heaven capital, but I have never seen them in the actions of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. When others report, they don't report the 3 of them, not even you, uncle. Li Tianlan said lightly. Listening to the report of Emperor Dong's palace, I often have an illusion that the think tanks of the Purgatory of Heaven capital seem to have only 4 people. Qianji, Qianzhong, John Doe and White Fox. I've heard these 4 names the most. Whether it's the external expansion or the game with Emperor Dong's palace, the figures of these 4 people are very clear. On the contrary, the other people's sense of existence is very weak. John Doe was dead. Qianji, Qianzhong, and White Fox's scalp went numb. Was he going to settle the score after the fall? Li Huazhang's heart shook, and he subconsciously stood in front of the people named by Li Tianlan. His body was tense, but then he relaxed a little dejectedly. Uncle, you worry too much. Li Tianlan said. If I wanted to kill them, they would have been dead long ago. He walked over the body of John Doe and sat down in front of the sofa. Han Xinyan seemed to have really become his personal secretary. She began to make tea for Li Tianlan, and arranged the fruit plate and dried fruits. Li Tianlan casually grabbed the dried fruit plate and put it back. Han Xinyan didn't find the fruit opener. She hesitated, grabbed the dried fruit, bit the shell with her little white teeth, and put the flesh in Li Tianlan's hand. Li Tianlan didn't mind and ate it. Han Xinyan continued to bite the second one silently. Li Huazhang watched this scene silently, and suddenly felt that John Doe's death was really not unreasonable. I can actually understand what Qianji Qianzhong did. And I can also understand what Aunt White Fox did. After all, Li Kuangtu has the blood of the Li family flowing in his body. It can be said that you are inclined to him. And it's okay that you want the purgatory of heaven capital to control Emperor Dong's palace. Li Tianlan smiled and said, "You approved of Li Kuangtu and helped him a lot, but you gave him a chance, but he was useless. What else could he do? You came to Emperor Dong's palace today, and I welcome you with both hands. At least, this shows that even when you supported Li Kuangtu, you didn't really regard me as an outsider of the Li family. You just don't want me to be the patriarch of the Li family, right?" Qianji and Qianzhong looked at each other. Qianji frowned. He actually didn't know Li Tianlan. They had never even been to the camp where the Li family was dormant, but Qianji hesitated and said softly, "Even if your majesty is not the blood of the Li family, you are raised by Senior Li. For the Li family, your majesty is naturally not an outsider." There was nothing more to say about this. In terms of blood relationship, they had no blood relationship with the Li family, but they thought that they were also members of the Li family. No one could deny this. If they did not, it was equivalent to slapping the faces of all the veterans who had no blood relationship with the Li family, but had done a lot for the Li family. "I know," Li Tianlan said calmly. "You think that I'm also a member of the Li family, but I'm not suitable to be the patriarch. But in the eyes of some people, I not only don't deserve to be the patriarch, but also don't deserve to have anything to do with the Li family." Qianji and Qianzhong froze for a moment. Li Huazhang narrowed his eyes. "You mean John Doe? He once looked for the Wang family of Beihai." Li Tianlan's tone was cold. "To be exact, he looked for Wang Xiao now. At that time, I had just come back from death in East Island, and went to the Polar Land. John Doe thought it was an opportunity. He persuaded Wang Xiaoyao to drug Little Bai. After that, Wang Xiaoyao would get Little Bai, and the purgatory of heaven capital would get Samsara Palace." Li Huazhang's face changed dramatically. Everyone's face changed dramatically. Little Bai, she was the real hostess of Emperor Dong's palace. Li Tianlan's talent was undeniable. It was possible for him to reach this height at this age, and even everything in Emperor Dong's palace now. To put it bluntly, it was not given by the Li family, because most of the Li family's power was in the purgatory of heaven capital. Everything in Emperor Dong's palace now was given by this hostess and Samsara Palace. Li Tianlan would never show mercy to anyone who dared to do anything to Qin Weibai. In this regard, he didn't care whether the other party was a hero of the Li family or not. How could it be? Li Huazhang muttered to himself. Li Tianlan didn't speak. "How do you know about this?" Li Huazhang suddenly asked. The period after Li Tianlan returned from the final battle of Heaven Capital. During that period, the purgatory of Heaven Capital was officially born, and the power of the Li family began to gather towards the purgatory of Heaven Capital. During that period, the relationship between the Dongqing clan and Li Tianlan was far less than it was now. During that period, Qin Weibai and Samsara Palace were Li Tianlan's biggest reliance. John Doe persuaded Wang Xiaoyao to drug Qin Weibai. If Wang Xiaoyao really succeeded, what would the consequences be? At that time, the master of Samsara Palace was still there. No, Li Huazhang's body suddenly shivered. Does Li Kuangtu know about this? I don't know if he knows, Li Tianlan said coldly. But does it make sense? This idiot. Li Huazhang gnashed his teeth and said. He's not stupid at all. Li Tianlan sneered. John Doe was lustful, but he persuaded Wang Xiaoyao to drug Qin Weibai without any intention of getting involved. Obviously, he had a certain understanding of Qin Weibai. Qin Weibai had never been submissive. If Wang Xiaoyao was really persuaded, Qin Weibai would definitely destroy Wang Xiaoyao and the entire Wang family of Beihai at all costs. Wang Xiaoyao getting Qin Weibai was completely bullsh*t. At that time, the most likely thing was that Samsara Palace and the Wang family of Beihai would fight to the death. The Wang family of Beihai would be injured, and Li Tianlan would lose all his reliance. After that, the purgatory of Heaven Capital, which was in full swing, could not only solve the threat of Li Tianlan, an outsider, but also tear a large piece of benefits from the Wang family of Beihai. It didn't matter whether Li Kuangtu knew or not. The important thing was that once things got to that point, what could Li Kuang to do even if he didn't know? When it was time to take action, he would never hesitate. What John Doe used was just Wang Xiaoyao's admiration for Qin Weibai. It was just a try. If it succeeded, it would be the best. If it failed, there was no loss. Instead, he could plant a foreshadowing and bring it up again when the opportunity was right. It was Wang Xiaoyao who told Little Bai about this. I checked later. During that time, John Doe and Wang Xiaoyao did meet in private. The corner of Li Huazhang's mouth twitched, and he couldn't speak. Wang Xiaoyao would tell Qin Weibai about this. Regardless of his personal character, at least it proved that Wang Xiaoyao was not stupid, or that he knew Qin Weibai's character very well and knew the consequences of doing so. After refusing John Doe, he took the initiative to tell Qin Weibai. This standard bootlicker behavior might not be unexpected to John Doe, but he didn't care. He was from the purgatory of heaven capital. Li Kuangtu would protect him, and the Samsara Palace couldn't do anything to him. As for Li Tianlan, at that time, perhaps Li Tianlan was nothing in John Doe's heart. The main purpose of him bewitching Wang Xiaoyao was not even to get rid of the threat of Li Tianlan. It was just a matter of convenience. His main purpose at that time was actually the Samsara Palace and the Wang family of Beihai. It was just that he didn't expect Li Tianlan to grow so fast, and he didn't expect Li Kuangtu to be so incompetent, so there were the current consequences. As for this being Wang Xiaoyao's framing, this possibility was just a thought. At that time, Wang Xiaoyao hadn't betrayed the Wang family of Beihai. Wang Xiaoyao didn't need to deliberately torment a John Doe. If the two sides didn't meet, Wang Xiaoyao wouldn't even know the existence of this person. I don't know if he really wants to join Emperor Dong's palace, or if he has other intentions. It doesn't matter. I didn't think of him before, but he came to me himself. Why can't I kill him? Li Tianlan opened his palm subconsciously, but not a single piece of fruit was placed in his palm. Li Tianlan turned his head and looked at it. Han Xinyan stood beside him expressionlessly and looked at him with some hidden bitterness. Her thoughts seemed to be written on her face. You didn't kill John Doe for me. Why should I serve you? Li Tianlan smiled indifferently, turned his head, and said slowly, Now is it time to get down to business? You're tuning in to the Echoes of the Heart YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.